continuing to adapt its tools, technology and workforce to meet the challenges. The $70 million investment through Budget 2026 will support this. The extra funding builds on previous investments to strengthen frontline capability, which includes upgrading key technologies such as X-ray imaging equipment. It allows Customs to strengthen its port facility security, helps ensure private industry partners in the supply chain meet their requirements too, and will support enhanced training for frontline staff who are facing more complicated, challenging environments. It also increases Customs' international reach with additional overseas liaison officers based in key strategic locations in the Pacific, South America, Europe, and the Middle East. It is no surprise that Customs continues to rate highly as one of the most trusted public sector agencies in New Zealand, featuring the top 4 across trust, social responsibility, leadership, and fairness in the latest Public Sector Reputation Index. This is only achievable through the dedication and efforts displayed every single day. So in closing, I would really like to acknowledge the incredible work of Customs officers across the country and internationally who play a vital role in keeping New Zealand safe and prosperous. Thank you.
Right, first question, Honourable Joe Luxton.
Thank you, and thank you, Minister, and thank you to the team for coming before the Select Committee. I want to focus a little bit on the illicit tobacco trade, if I might, to start with. Do you know how much is entering New Zealand at the moment?
The illicit market
tobacco. Do you know how much?
How much tobacco is entering or illicit tobacco?
Illicit tobacco is entering New
Zealand.
Do you have an idea?
No, it's very hard to quantify the exact numbers. We know that we are intercepting. And there is various indications around, I think one of the surveys is based upon the number of empty tobacco cigarette packets that are found. There's various measures around the excise intake versus smoking rates. The challenge that we've got is the smoking rate numbers. The health survey that is completed measures up to June 2025, and we won't have the results of that until later this year, sorry, December 2025. So we won't have the results. So at the moment, we know the smoking rate's about 6.8%. So quantifying what the difference is around, you know.
Do you have an idea of how much you're intercepting then?
Yes, we do have interception rates. Sorry, I'll just get the data.
Thank you.
Oh, there we go. So January to April 2026, 7,708 kilograms total is intercepted. That's just this year up to April 2026. That's 8.3 million cigarettes, 1,031 kilograms of loose tobacco, equating to foregone revenue of 15.2 million. The legitimate market value of that would be 17.2 million. For 2025, it was 19,905 kilograms in total, which was 14.8 million cigarettes and 8,000 kilograms of loose tobacco.
So the previous government had set aside $3 million a year specifically to address the tobacco smuggling. Budget 2026 shows that you've not extended that funding. It's on the bottom of page 17 in the budget document. How many FTEs worked on addressing the tobacco smuggling specifically until the funding ran out?
So I'm not aware the funding has run out. Does it
for that specific project? The $3 million that was. So I'll just ask you again. The previous government set aside $3 million a year to specifically address tobacco smuggling. So it's just in the bottom. Yeah. Budget 2026 shows that that hasn't been extended beyond that funding. So how many FTEs worked on addressing tobacco smuggling specifically until that funding ran out? Has there been any change?
There has been no change in the enforcement, but I'll refer to Jamie just in terms of how that is structured.
So we do have a dedicated fraud prohibition team which focuses on tobacco, and that's around 10 officers, but then we are supported by surveillance officers, forensic investigators and an intelligence apparatus, etc. That is continuing. So we haven't taken any FTE away from that effort.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Do you accept that $16 million in tobacco excise revenue was lost to illicit sales in 2025? Do you expect that to go up or down?
I think, unfortunately, it will probably go up, but we are shifting in terms of a more holistic response. So this is why I've set up the action group with health, customs and police. At the moment, a lot of the work customs has done is purely border. So what we're trying to do is feed that through into the retail network. So we're not just, so once it's in the retail network that we're doing more enforcement in that space, and that's where we're working with health and police in that response.
Thank you. Have any projections been done to see how the investments in budget 2026 to tackle smuggling might reduce the amount of illicit tobacco coming in? If not, why?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
How many projections, or have any projections, sorry, been done to see how the investments in budget 2026 to tackle smuggling might reduce the amount of illicit tobacco coming in? If not, why not?
I think it's one of those things that's very hard to commoditise the specific impact, because as I've said repeatedly, this is an organised crime network issue, and so therefore they are commodity agnostic. So whatever they can do to make money, they will do. That is why we're sort of focusing not only on the border control, but the retail network impact, as well as getting people to stop smoking. So all three of those are part of that response solution. So in terms of an analysis about which specific commodity we will have the most impact on, this is why the investment is across all of that. So it's the X-ray equipment, it's the increase in the personnel, it's the technology investment. So it's across all of that. So quantifying the impact on one specific commodity will be challenging, but it is absolutely acknowledged that it is a big issue and we need to address it.
Thank you.
Look, thank you, Minister. Look, just moving on to the India Free Trade Agreement, and there's a data exchange system. I'm scratching my head about as to what that is and how that will play out. So maybe could you explain just what it is and how it's going to operate?
Yeah, I will let the technical people, but it is.
Oh, well, I'm just, no, I understand. And
it is part of a condition so that the data can be exchanged. So it is us creating a platform to allow that condition of the process to be, but I'll let the comptroller.
So I'm going to say rules of origin, Mr. O'Connor, so ensuring that New Zealand exporters can say this is a New Zealand export and vice versa. We have a similar thing in place with China. We've had that in place for many years.
So, I mean, it seems very simple, but actually, ensuring the integrity, the credibility, the data that goes into that system. Could you explain how that is going to be established in both countries? I guess we assume we know what we're doing, but actually the level of e-commerce is relatively low in e-certification. So how will this roll through?
I'll pass to one of my team in a moment, but I will say the Indian system have done this with Korea recently, and the system's working well. And from what we've seen so far, it looks so it's got high integrity, and actually there are some really capable people on the Indian side. So can you talk to them?
Yes.
Maybe.
The data set is information provided by exporters to authorised bodies such as New Zealand Chamber of Commerce. The data set is then transferred to India for use and validation. So they'll have a declaration from an importer, an Indian customs officer who wants to check that import declaration matches what happened in New Zealand. So as Christine said, it will validate against the origin information. So the data set will be exchanged using our normal standards for exchange with other countries. So for example, with China, it's a separate platform exchange between us and China. It doesn't go through our system, and it's checked for security, cyber security, and those particular requirements.
Can I just, given that today I think China has rejected a shipment of chili from India into their market on the basis of some MRLs and some how do we know that the systems that we put in place will have the adequate safeguards?
Yes. So there'll be a response message sent back to say that the data has been accepted by India, and if the data is not accepted by India, they'll send a response to say it hasn't been, can you go back and validate it for us? That's the purpose of the data exchange.
So that's them accepting it. I'm talking more about data from India
No, that is not, the data from India is only a response to the New Zealand information. There's no reciprocal arrangement for India to provide us with information about Indian shipments to New Zealand, if that's what we're trying to clarify.
So there's none?
No, because New Zealand has a different system. Certificates of origin are accepted by some countries as a requirement to validate origin. We've always had in the New Zealand system since 1996 a self-declaration system, because we rely on the importer to declare, and then we'll use audit to validate against the commercial documents whether they've made the declaration correct or not. But other countries seek additional assurance, such as a certificate issued by a third party, such as a Chamber of Commerce. So during trade negotiations with China and India, we've accepted their position and agreed to that proposal for that.
Look, I'm not necessarily questioning, but we do have one coalition partner who says this trade agreement is no good for a whole lot of reasons. I'm not going to go into them. But one of the inferences is around it's a relatively new exchange program between our two countries, and I think that there is an assumption that rules of origin and that the products coming from India into our country are properly certified, verified, and checked by customs. That would be the assumption.
So
are you saying that?
Sorry,
I haven't finished.
No, sorry, apologies. Yeah.
Are you saying that we will be relying on self-certification for all the goods coming out of the Indian market into New Zealand?
Yes, that's what the agreement says.
Okay.
I'm interested to move into the overseas.
So that's the information, sorry, that will be going into the data exchange?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, this just to clarify. Sorry, I made it you're astray. So we will get the same information. We will get the same information. It's just provided in a different manner. Right. So we receive the information from an importer. We can validate the commercial documents under our law as with for Indian shipments as we can currently. For India, they require an additional piece of assurance, which is a document from the Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you.
So,
Establishing 4 new posts overseas to try and make a greater impact on the illicit drug trade, which is a real issue, obviously. I'm just interested in a bit more insight around how you've chosen those 4 regions, and if you can tell us specifically where within those regions you anticipate setting up those new posts and when.
Okay, so we're moving forward, I think, prioritising. We've got Pacific and Colombia as the first roles we're establishing. Then we'll move into Europe and the Middle East in the
Where will the
later
Pacific
years.
one be?
Pacific is Fiji.
Fiji,
So at the moment we have a role that covers the whole Pacific. So he's travelling quite a bit. So this will enable a permanent position to be based in Fiji, which is probably the priority area, as you can appreciate. The other component is recognising that the role isn't just about organised crime, it is about facilitating trade. So that is a part of those decision-making processes as well.
Excellent. And when do you envisage they'll be established?
As soon as we can. We have to find the right person within the organisation, so.
But imminently rather than 6 months?
Yes.
Yes, as soon as we can.
Excellent.
We
Do you have a sup on that or?
Sup on, oh, sorry.
No, this is okay.
It is a sup on that one. I guess that we understand the international collaboration, I guess, the gangs, but we have a record level of methamphetamine use in this country. And so the assumption would be that it's a failure at the border. We're letting in more methamphetamine, or it's being produced here. And so what's the simple explanation as to why we're letting so much through?
I would challenge that it's not we're letting more through. There's a lot of unknowns. We know that there is starting to be labs being set up. So there is that component starting to come back again, which we haven't had. And the other component is if you look at the intercepts that we've had, although methamphetamine interception is lower so far year to date, our cocaine interceptions are way up, our GL, those other drug interceptions. So the use component this is where we have some uncertainty around yes, there is challenges around what's getting in, but the reality is that given the commodity we're dealing with, there is components, whether it's being stockpiled in this country, whether it was already here, what are those things? Because we are dealing with business cartels that are organised in the way they approach. So we started to see the increase coming from about mid-2024, and that has been, there's been some sort of impact, but largely it's been increasing up, so unacceptably high levels. And the other problem we've got is the level of sophistication around those systems every avenue. So we had the containers, and as you saw with Operation Girder last year, this was inserted into steel girders, which, there was sort of 3 girders in a whole 40-foot container that had methamphetamine in them. Those, big machinery that's had it implanted. So this is why this investment is so important, because their sophistication is so high. And this is why the international relationships, the intelligence analytics, the relationships, and that's why we've seen the interceptions off border, as well as the other work we've done within the Pacific. So if you look at Operation Kiwa, about the work that we've been doing within the Pacific, the interception of the 4 tonnes of cocaine in the Pacific earlier this year, all of those components are part of these sort of strengthening the collective border.
Would it be fair to say that your interception methods are becoming more sophisticated as well, such that you're identifying product and therefore recording a higher level that perhaps in the past might not necessarily have been detected?
And the challenge is that this is all of these ways. It's not just you see it at the data, the mail centre in terms of the types of interceptions we're getting there. The containers, the sea chests, the narco subs, all of these components are part of the collective response. The small package stuff, all of those sort of things come part of this response.
If I could add, too, we've had twice as many couriers through airports this year as we saw last year, and this is a global phenomenon. I would push back against failing at the border. Of course, some is getting in, but there are record production of cocaine and meth in South America that is affecting the world. Closure of the US southern border has certainly meant the cartels are looking in this direction. We're a very lucrative market. Australia is too. This is of great concern, and we're working as hard as we can to deal with it. But could I just also say that this is a demand side problem as well. We will not enforce our way out of this at the border. We really do need to tackle this also at the consumption end. And so you'll see the Transnational Serious Organised Crime Action Plan this year is funding ROC programs in the community. They're looking successful, and this is what we really also have to do. We'll work as hard as we can at the border, but while domestic consumption, this is an attractive.
So your point that you just made about twice as many couriers at the border, so that's twice as many people being discovered trying to carry stuff across the border, presumably off aircraft generally, is it? So is it ever possible to know if you're twice as good at finding them, and if you're finding twice as many, if there's twice as many trying to come through and you're finding about the same percentage, or if there's actually 10 times as many coming through and you're finding more, but will you ever actually know?
No.
And this is why New Zealand's wastewater testing we're quite unique around the detail that we have from our wastewater testing. So we do have very accurate measures. So because the testing is done around the country, so that is the only thing we've got to know whether there's impact. And we've seen it where you've had a big, like the operation we did in Butterick, the wastewater testing after that big operation showed a reduction in the wastewater results. So we know where we have impact. So we know those things are impacting, but that is really the only measure we have to know what the impact we are having.
But it's always as a subset of what you find, right? Because it could be that, I don't know, wastewater shows it's gone up. That might be that there's a much lower percentage coming over the border, but there was just so much to start with that it's going to go up. Or it could be the opposite, but then you see the impact obviously down track with law enforcement, Portsky, and your example was one where it drops off after that. So you can see the impact on the ground where operations are done locally, but you'll never actually know how much they were trying to get in and what percentage you caught and therefore.
And this is the point that I made about this risk that there is,
Yeah.
you know, it is a very high commodity price. Methamphetamine specifically is probably one of the highest methamphetamine prices. That's why we see so much methamphetamine. If you go to the States or UK, they see hardly any methamphetamine. We have a very high retail price. So therefore there is the risk that there is stockpiling. It is a supply-driven issue that we're dealing with. So yeah, in terms of measuring how much is actually getting through, we just keep doing as much as we can and hope that uses come down.
Supplementary.
Look, just one question, because I mean, it can come in two ways, as methamphetamine or as precursors. So I guess the question is, do you think there's more or less being manufactured within the country, which means precursors are coming through the border, or is it methamphetamine?
There isn't a huge, like what we're seeing from the operations that we've had, we're not seeing a huge, but we are intercepting precursors. That definitely is occurring. We have quite a significant number of precursor intercepts as well. So we're not, and you know, even customs is, they're commodity agnostic as well. It's everything. It's not just, so we are seeing, we're not seeing those big operations, but we are seeing that starting to occur, that we've got the labs. But given how cheap it is to purchase externally, and that they can afford to lose 3 containers out of 4, if they can get 1 through, then it's very lucrative for them. So, and that's why all of those components, the technology, the skill of our people, the international relationships, the Pacific as a collective border, all of those things come part of this response.
So
Yeah, mine was just a clarification. Did you say that we're seeing more labs popping up?
We are seeing labs popping up. It's not, there was almost none, and we're now starting to see domestic manufacture starting to occur.
When did you start to notice that?
There's been recent operations within the last year, is the information that I've been given.
supplementary, Dr. Shaw.
Thanks. When you say you're seeing precursors, are you seeing pseudoephedrine specifically increase in any numbers that are material?
Not the pseudoephedrine
It's
itself.
more ephedrine.
Just ephedrine?
Yeah.
But that's not to say there's no pseudoephedrine, but it's more ephedrine.
In numbers that are material?
Yes.
Our next question, Honourable Joe.
Oh, sorry, yes. So as part of the Budget 2026 announcements, the government announced measures to transform the public service. And I just want to know, is the New Zealand Customs Service Child Exploitation Operations Team exempt from the public services public servant job number cuts?
So no decisions have been made around those. So this is a part of the planning process. So no decisions have been made around what that looks like and how that will be structured.
Okay, so when will those decisions be likely to be made?
We'll work through that framework. I think there's a process being worked through around what that would look like and where those savings will be made. The commitment is that frontline services are protected, but this means, you know, as we've gone through this process before, there is efficiencies that can be made to support those frontline services, and that will be the process that is worked through.
So no one from the Child Exploitation Operations Team themselves will be?
The frontline services will be protected, but I'm not going to preempt decisions because I don't know what is the staff in that. And
Why is it taking so long to make those decisions? Because we've had answers from other ministers who basically said yes and no when they've been asked similar questions.
I mean, Customs is a smaller team. There is a
Correct.
smaller unit. We are very aware that we need to protect it. So we will work through the process to ensure that no off-the-cuff decisions are made. This is a very complex process, and these are complex roles that are being filled.
So you can't give us a timeline of when you're likely to have a decision?
No.
Thank you. Same with the Customs Services Border Operations Group? Would it be the same answer there?
Yes, so there's no decisions being made around roles.
All right. Next question, Francisco Hernandez.
Thank you. It somewhat relates to the public service transformation that's being undertaken in the public service. One of the things that the minister said that will sort of fill the gap of the public service will be the use of AI. Could you give me an idea of how AI is currently being used in customs and how it's being proposed to be used as part of this transformation program?
I wouldn't, again, there's no specifics, but what we do know is there is opportunities to create, particularly when you're dealing with analytics, there's huge amounts of data that Customs works through, but I can talk to Jamie around the specifics of AI.
So we have Microsoft Copilot, which allows us to kind of more efficiently look at sort of writing documents and things. That gives us some saving. We're doing some pilots. So we're doing some pilots around our call center, which is kind of much quicker, more effective way of, capturing the calls so we can kind of make sure we've got the answers right. Actually, we're using in some of our forensics capability, the ability to translate foreign language messages that we've managed to kind of crack into on suspects' phones and things like that. So that gives us big efficiencies with translation services and things like that.
But could I also say, within strict guardrails, we are not going outside of customs at the moment. We have a governance group across this. Staff have to bring a case to that governance group before we approve any use, and a human being is still making all the decisions. So we're trying to be cautiously ambitious, if I can put it that way.
Cool. And is it correct that that currently there's no specific government funding around enabling the use of AI? So it's all currently coming from baseline customs funding, and in the future, it's coming from baseline funding?
Can't speak for the future, but for now, that's
For now, it's all baseline funded.
Okay.
Good. Next question, Honourable Joe Luxton.
Thank you. How much of the funding assigned to customs in budget 2026 over the forecast period is expected to be spent on recruiting new customs officers?
The recruitment.
So budget 26 gives us 44 additional staff, and I don't know what so it's whatever that is times.
Thank you.
Staff.
How many recruits are needed to make sure that the 7 of the 16 seaports that did not have a permanent officer on site as at April the 2nd, 2026 will have on in the future?
I think one of the seaport discussions, which is really important in this space, those decisions were made about not having loan officers.
Okay.
It was a safety decision around ensuring that no officers, given the environments we're currently working in. So those ports have response, they have teams that will be deployed, but we do not want to have loan officer positions. So if from a risk response point of view, we need to grow capability, that would be part of the considerations. But when we took staff away, that wasn't related to the specifics of cost saving. It was actually taking some initiatives around what is the best way to serve those areas without compromising staff safety, and that was part of the response we had.
Thank you. Have you got any plans for reducing the amount of seaports without a permanent customs officer down from the 43% it was in April?
There's no plan, and as I've said, there is no plans at this point around what we are very focused on is ensuring that our frontline delivery, that is about ensuring that we facilitate trade, that we allow trade activity to happen, manage the risk around those ports, and that we do the very best we can in those spaces. But any decisions, and this is why it is a complex process around where we deploy resources and how that is established.
Just interested in that comment around reducing the presence where there are sole operators. What were the risks that you were seeing they were facing?
It's just people working alone. That is the main issue is loan officer positions.
Sorry, how's that a risk?
Because the nature of the roles they fill, that they're not. That's not optimum around having staff who, given the nature of the roles they do, and those ports didn't require full-time presence. So there was a number of decisions that went into that process. So, for example, Gisborne Port is supported by Napier, so the staff will travel to Gisborne as required. Those are the decisions that are made in that space, and they are operational decisions, but that was.
So they can shift from one port to the
But
other.
perhaps as an example, if you're in Timaru, you're on your own, you have to go on board a ship, deal with the crew. The crew may not be that happy to have an official on board. Being on your own is not safe. And even if you just trip and fall, you don't have anyone there to assist you or help you. So.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I've got to start on that as well. So as the example you used for Timaru is an example. Obviously your Tauranga and your Auckland, all those areas are where your main cargo and all that's coming in and out. So when you talked about Napier, say in Gisborne, perhaps sharing officers, if there is a cruise ship or something coming into Gisborne, are you saying that the officers would leave Napier and perhaps go there? And what about the likes, if you think about your logging ships that come into Gisborne every single day, there's several of them, but there wouldn't be someone, sorry, I'll just finish. There is still a risk that drugs are being brought in on those ports, so yeah, have you thought about that?
Yes.
Yeah.
So ships coming into New Zealand, unlikely to be bringing logs, more likely to be taking logs, but
There is that.
but they will come to a port of first arrival, which will most often be a large port, most often Auckland, Tauranga, Littleton, sometimes Port Chalmers, and we have staff there all the time. But the ships and their cargoes more particularly always risk assessed before they come here. And if we were particularly concerned or the ship was arriving for the first time, then we will have staff there.
Okay, all right. That's lovely. Thank you. Okay, so part of the 70 million announced to crack down on smuggling is meant to tighten security at ports and airports. But how much of that $70 million will specifically go on making sure those ports have permanent staff present?
So the deployment of staff is that is where staff needs to be put. So at no point currently is there ports that we are feeling are vulnerable that don't have a presence. There is. So the way that customs operates is that, as the comptroller has said, there is risk profiling. We know who's coming to us. We know where that. So if it's the first time a ship has been here, those sort of decisions are made operationally. So the deployment of staff, what we will have is the ability to have a bit more flexibility around where staff are deployed, to have an operational response, to deal with things that are occurring, to have that investigation capability. I'm sure Jamie can add in about how these staff will be deployed, but it is just as you have with a police deployment agency, to have the flexibility around where staff will be deployed in response to what issues. That is part of that process. The other part is the security component is part of the border security bill, which will be being introduced, is actually adding security capability and security legislative powers for customs officers to do more, so stop vehicles coming off ports, etc. Those sort of things. But Jamie can add to more specifics around staff.
I mean, the Minister is absolutely correct. Where risk is where we put our officers. But we did receive funding in, I think, 2023 to establish more presence in our seaports, and so we've done that with that funding. So I think we're up to about 100 officers in our maritime group. So that's allowed us to kind of populate those key ports.
Supplementary, Tim Costello.
So I'm just thinking through, we've had a few questions. One was about seaports and this one just about, I guess, the approach to staff, or should you be, this isn't what Ms. Luxon asked, but, you know, should you have more fixed staff in each location or the flexible approach? So what would be the impact on operations if you took a more fixed approach, that you had to have a certain number in every location rather than the sort of adaptive agile approach you're taking? What does that do to both efficiency and effectiveness?
Well, I would argue not only is it safer to be operating as we are now, but it is more efficient. So taking Timaru as an example, but you could take Ralph or Gisborne. Ships are not in there all the time, and we have sufficient staff on the maritime group, as Jamie says now, that when we know we've got ships coming into Timaru that we're interested in, the team go down. It's a 2.25 hour drive from Christchurch. They deal with the ship. Sometimes they'll stay overnight if they need to, but then they can get back to Christchurch. So we can deploy those people. But if Timaru only has a couple of ships a week, you've got people sitting there doing what? You know, you have to try and find something else for them to do, and that's not straightforward.
And I guess that's the same, I'm thinking of airports, some of the military ones, or Hakia, that has occasional flights that come in, but not all the time. I don't know how often the Hamilton flights that have started now.
I can talk to Hamilton if you like. So Hamilton, we don't have a team there. We actually bus officers down from Auckland Airport. A few reasons for that, but again, one flight a day, having staff sitting there. And I think they're back to 5 flights a week at the moment.
Yep.
Not 7 days a week. So, you know, I just don't want to have staff sitting there. So we drive them down. They process the flights and then going out and they go to Auckland. It's also good actually because Hamilton's relatively small, relatively speaking. I don't want people to become complacent. It's just as likely to have couriers coming through it as any other airport.
Yeah.
And the Auckland Airport staff are very, very attuned to that. So it means you're getting that level of experience. Dollars are going down.
And so am I understanding this correctly, that taking this sort of agile approach, this sort of risk-based approach, that gets us, like, I love the efficiency of it, but does that get us a more effective result? You use the example of Hamilton where you're sending an experienced cruise rather than having sort of part-timers that you'd have to recruit and train just for a, once a day. Are we getting, ultimately, I guess Kiwis just want to know, does that get us the best result at the border with the resources that we have available as a country?
My judgment is yes, and that's why we're doing it.
And I think that the work that Customs has done and Jamie's been leading the way that the officers are being trained, inducted and trained into, so they're trained across a number of capabilities, so that the workforce is very flexible and agile, and there is definitely specialists that do specific tasks, but having Customs officers that are trained across a number of things, so they are becoming more flexible. And this is, that response capability. There is, of course, at our key places, there is dedicated workforce that is there and present, and because there is the workload, but having the ability to deploy. So, for example, in the peak period at Auckland Airport, when we have the most travellers, we are able to deploy staff to ramp up to respond to those peak periods, and then move staff back to other areas, because that's the efficient way of using the workforce whilst maintaining that capability.
Thank you.
Next question, Honourable Damien
Look,
O'Connor.
thank you very much. And kind of along those lines, what percentage of containers coming into the country are actually inspected?
So every container that comes into the country is risk assessed. So
It's
that
risk
is
assessed.
risk assessed,
That
and
is
then
that through the
yeah.
system. How many are inspected?
So are you saying in terms of X-ray screening? Or?
Well, I guess the next question is around transitional facilities, and so given that we do have, if you take, I guess, illicit drugs or tobacco, we have an increasing number or amount coming into the country. So I guess the question of, have you maintained the same level of inspection that you've always had, or are you adjusting that? So firstly, what is the baseline inspection percentage of containers?
I can give you some numbers here. So just in the maritime containers, 486,000 roughly were imported 25-26. Obviously, we've still got a little bit of 26 to kind of go in this financial year. As the Minister mentioned, 100% will be screened, will be risk assessed. 10,497 were X-rayed, and this is in our seaports or elsewhere. And we basically opened 2,500. And then
So
completely
2,500 of 400,000.
Yes.
And X-ray,
So
10,500.
I guess the question is, that's a very low percentage.
Yes.
So how do you know that your risk assessment is validated by that low level of inspection?
Because we have an assurance program that statistically looks across our trade streams, and we know that basically compliance is around 98, 99, 100% depending on the stream. So we run a program that just goes around and just checks that we're getting the intelligence and the risk assessment right, and that gives us that reassurance.
Well, in that case, why are we seeing more illicit goods coming through the border?
Because we're up against highly sophisticated, ingenious advocates, and we have the world's 11th largest coastline, and we pay a high price, so we're in demand as a market.
So, sorry, Mr. Chairman, if I can go on. So you are using transitional facilities, that is, the containers go from the boat to a facility somewhere, anywhere, where it's
Customs controlled area, yes.
customs controlled
Yes.
or transition for
Yep, yep.
biosecurity. So what percentage of containers go to those customs controlled areas? Before any inspection occurs?
I would have to come back to you with a number that we would actually inspect in a CCA versus at a seaport. But as I say, I gave you the numbers there. So the overwhelming majority, we will not have any interaction with, because the overwhelming majority of trade is legitimate.
Mr. Chair, on that basis, given the increasing pressure and sophistication, do you think you need to change the system that you're using?
Yes, and we do. So for example, we have launched an operation in Tauranga, just looking quite bluntly at South American containers, because our adversaries have taken a different approach, which is not burying it in machinery or doing anything like that. It's about just attacking the container in, for example, Panama, where they throw it in the back with a duffel bag. Our risk assessment will not see that, other than we know it's come from South America. So we have a program that looks at South American containers, and that has been successful, and it seized a lot of cocaine coming through Tauranga.
So,
But they adapt, to our successes.
yes, sorry, Mr. Chair, on the basis of, you've said that, so you shifted one, but I guess the question is, what's the dynamism of, or lack of your assessment process that allows them to keep ahead of this?
So it is a game of cat and mouse. We deconstruct every seizure that we have to understand it, and we kind of look at particular data points or anything around that, and working with our intelligence, working with our international partners to understand it. And we do, reassess, reevaluate that, and look at how we do our targeting. So that continuously adapts.
So that's 2,500 actually inspected to
With 100%
validate the
risk
systems
assessed.
that cover 400,000 containers.
Correct.
And this is why the Border Security Bill is also part of that work. So it's the ability to have more powers. So for the example that was mentioned about ripping bags out of containers, it's about the security that's on the ports, it's the vetting of staff that work on the ports, it's the ability to have better CCTV coverage and interventions. That was well publicised, the attacks on the ports in Tauranga around what was being done to rip those containers. So even on that basis, all of those factors become part of that response capability.
And if I could add, actually, one of the things we have done actively, and we received some money for this through budget 25. Yes.
Yeah.
We have an initiative called Border Protect. We have teams who go out to industry, transitional facilities, if you like, CCAs, literally every day. They talk to them about what does normal look like, and these companies know their businesses very well. And what we say to them is, if you see something that seems odd, even the smallest thing, just give us a call, we'll come down. That has been a pretty successful program. We get referrals from industry literally every day, and conversion rate to finding something illegal drugs, depending on the week, but it varies between about 50% and 70%, 75% of those turn into something. So, because we can't do this alone, and industry do not want to be a part of this. They are very keen to help us, and that's invaluable. And that's just something we didn't do 3 or 4 years ago.
And this is where, we've had the issues with the baggage handlers at the airport facilitating unaccompanied baggage, all of those, like every time, as has been explained, it is all of those components will be part of it. So if we put all resources into containers, I could absolutely guarantee that there will be, pleasure vessels, there will be, dumped out at sea, all of those components will be part of what we see. And that's why we've got to do the scattergun approach ourselves around doing as much as we can with the resources we have.
Okay, we've got time for one more question on J. Lux.
Thank you. Budget 2026 outlines baseline savings of $1.7 million a year for the New Zealand Customs Service. Will these baseline savings change how much is being spent on training customs officers?
No.
What level of training do new recruits currently receive?
The current program is
13
13
weeks.
weeks.
Yes, and it's a new program that we have, and that exposes our officers to the majority of customs work.
And that 13 weeks is what they spend training before they are on frontline?
Correct.
Okay. What training is available to staff already employed by customs? I see you've got an enhanced training incentive there and new funding, but other than that?
We have an abundance of training. We have investigations training, forensics training, intelligence training. We have X-ray equipment training, data analytics training, kind of you name it, we train on it. So it's quite extensive.
And how many FTEs are specifically employed to undertake or to give that training? Do you know?
PNC 12.
12.
Okay,
Is that,
very good.
sorry, on that?
Got time for
So just one more, okay.
Okay, one more.
Will that number of 12 who provide the training likely reduce as a result of having to lower the headcount of public service?
I would say unlikely because part of budget 26 was we were part of the component of the 44 additional people we were given funding for our trainers.
Can I sneak one more?
We're a bit over time.
No, we're not
Um,
on time.
We've got
Three
to
oh
10 past
five on the
three.
agenda, Mr.
Only
Chairman.
5 minutes early. so
3:05
we are
on the
out of time.
agenda here. That's
All right.
3:05.
Well, thank you very much for coming in, Minister, Comptroller. Appreciate your time. And can you please pass on our thanks to all of your amazing custom staff for the work they do on our behalf. It's tremendous.
Thank you, guys.
Mate, that's your call.
Thank you.
That was 3:05 on the agenda. That is
60 minutes.
That is unconstitutional.
Oh, we started early though.
Even you can say.
45.
Madam Speaker, kindly note, we've digitized the remote. Once we governed primetime slots, now we govern camera shots. Public service loud and proud, now optimized for scrolling crowds. Policy in 916, democracy but make it lean. We held an inquiry into the frame, found landscape privilege was to blame. Vertical equity's overdue, representation in every view. Rotate the nation, spin it right, portrait by day, widescreen by night. For every thumb and every couch, we've got a format to renounce.
Prioritisation. We're seeing technology sort of starting to solve this problem more and more as well with the sort of direct-to-device from satellites. So I think, you know, some networks you can already text when you're outside cell phone coverage or in disasters, and networks have plans to roll out sort of voice-to-phone coverage from satellites over the next couple of years. So I think in terms of actual disaster recovery, that's a real game changer.
350 is a lot, because you've got to remember there's a lot of mobile towers in New Zealand, but they duplicate themselves. So we're only focusing on non-duplicated towers.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's a lot. It's about a third of the unique mobile towers in New Zealand. So it's a lot.
That's a lot. Dr. David Wilson?
Just in terms of terrestrial fibre, subsea cable between North Island and South Island is one, as I understand. Is that correct?
Oh, I think there might be,
There's two.
there's a couple. One goes off the west coast as well.
One goes across, right, and then there's the ones that the Transpower has under with the power cables.
Okay, that gives me some more confidence,
Yeah.
because I'm a bit worried that if they were going to cut the power cable between us and the South Island.
That's right, and I think there's more than one Transpower cable off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you.
All right, we go back to Ruben Davidson.
Thank you. I've got a relatively technical question here.
It's not that.
Yep.
A relatively technical question here, so I'm going to read a large part of it. The country's primary export industries now depend on connectivity that runs through a single foreign provider, on terms that can be changed without notice, that no New Zealand authority can compel. A recent industry commissioned report, this is the Flint Global March 2026, paragraph 53, identifies national security or digital sovereignty considerations as risks of satellite-based networks. The analysis to quantify that exposure has not been done, and the situation is now forming faster than the absence of analysis can be corrected. Is that of concern to you? Do you think it should be?
Well, I think what we've seen over the last few years is a global provider come in and offer a service that is of great value to a number of New Zealanders who have purchased it. Nobody's forced them to do it. They've done it because it's better than anything they've had available to them at that point. And so I would have thought that's a good thing and not something that we want to get in the way of. Yes, it's not something that New Zealand owns or controls, so that is a difference. But again, I put to you what is your suggestion? We're not proposing for a New Zealand government entity to start their own satellite network. So we could regulate, and there are elements that can be considered there, but obviously we want to be careful about doing that because we want to ensure that New Zealanders continue to have access to this game-changing technology. There's been a lot of discussions about a second provider entering the field, and that would be welcome. But fundamentally, what's happened is that a company has come along offering a new service using a new technology that a lot of New Zealanders are using, and it's providing much better connectivity than they've ever had in the past. And I think that's a good thing.
So there's nothing else that you think you need to do in that space to?
Well, we obviously, we look at the system as a whole, and we want to ensure that New Zealanders have access to the best connectivity. And ultimately, as I said at the start, with 88% of New Zealanders having access to fibre, which is the gold standard in terms of speed and of downloading and uploading, then that's great, and we want to continue to build on that.
Right. We have supplementary from Dr. Vanessa Winning.
Thank you, Minister. Do you think it's the role of the government to provide all of the funding and support for the infrastructure, or do you think there's other ways that it can be achieved?
Well, no. I mean, obviously, telecom. The majority of investment in telecoms infrastructure has been done through the private sector. We've got three cellular companies and a number of other companies involved in fibre and in Whisper. The internet-based, Wi-Fi-based internet, and so and many other areas. And so the primary sort of public focus is to ensure that the regulatory settings are encouraging continued investment, and that's good. And if you were to contrast that with many other areas of investment, some of which are dominated more by local government or central government, I think this is an area that is done very well. And I think the private sector engagement in that is a big part of it.
And so, Minister, do you think that what the sector has been asking for has been more of that regulatory relief and to make sure that those requirements are fixed and are favourable rather than necessarily looking what the funding allocations are?
Yeah, well, the regulatory tension that we often face is, particularly in the allocation of spectrum and things like that, is to ensure that that investments have been made are not unduly affected by subsequent decisions, and so there's an investment certainty. But we're also concerned that we want to see plenty of competition and new entrants coming into the field, and so we balance those two things.
There's also been, I think obviously we keep a pretty close eye on the regulatory system. I think there have been a couple of bills through this committee recently as well, which I think were reported back over the last couple of months, which make a handful of regulatory tweaks and changes.
And I want to thank the committee for their
I was kind of like leading you by the nose for that
contribution.
It's been a real pleasure.
Dr. Hamish Campbell.
Yes, and actually it's probably led on to probably what my primary question was going to be is, Minister, what's your approach to the telecommunications regulations, which will create a more competitive and resilient digital environment that will support economic growth and innovation for businesses and households in New Zealand?
Yes, well, I mean, what we aspire to achieve is a measure of regulatory certainty, and then regulatory restraint, and so a big part of the wider government effort in terms of RMA reform and this thing called NESTEF, which is the rules in relation to putting up cell phone towers. All of that we consider in the light of trying to make it easier for people to do things and less expensive in a regulatory sense, while always preserving the rights of New Zealanders to have a say on what goes on in their broader environment within reasonable bounds. And so we're trying to get that setting right. We've got the Telecommunications Commissioner who acts as a sort of a watch, which is, and that process through the Commerce Commission has been subject of some reform, but we think is good sound framework in place. And then, you know, over the last few years, the government has taken a role in investing in the rollout of the ultra-fast broadband and rural broadband initiatives. But fundamentally, is very much a private sector-based sector. And the good news is that people continue to invest significantly in New Zealand, and we want to keep it that way.
Ruben Davidson.
Thank you. One of the areas that is often overlooked and in this part of the examination is the funding and services for deaf, hearing impaired and speech impaired people. And I see that that's forecast to decrease going into 26, 27. But I'm also conscious that there's a tender process underway currently for New Zealand relay services. And there's been, as you're probably aware, some concern around the lack of communication and pace, or not the lack of pace, but the pace of that consultation process, particularly given the stakeholders who may want to engage with it. And I'm just curious as to whether you've had those concerns raised, as I have, and what, if anything, you're prepared to do to ensure that there's a quality consultation process that happens there and that the stakeholders that should be involved are able to be engaged with.
Yeah, well, the short answer is yes, I have heard those concerns raised, and James might be able to.
Yeah, sure.
Detail.
Just a few answers just on the funding decrease. That's really a consequence of the timing of the procurement project, so the sequencing of when the spend happens. So it's not a reduction in the funding on the service or the quality of the service. We take those, you know, that feedback and from the sector extremely seriously. We're very conscious about who we're providing the service for, and we want to make sure we get that consultation right with those community members. So yes, we will be working closely with them to, you know, address their concerns.
So is that a extra effort, or is that an extension to the consultation window?
I think there'll be an extra effort. Yeah, I think there's plenty of time in this process to do more engagement, but you know, we want to make sure we hear directly from the community as well. So we'll be reaching out to them.
Sure. And how's that come about, given that you've spoken about the fact that you are really conscious of that community, and given that they do have additional challenges with engaging with a lot of government process and official process? How's that eventuated in this event?
I'm not completely sure. But I guess from here we can say we will make sure we will engage with the community fully and, you know, address their concerns.
Sure. And Minister, specifically, I'm curious what you might be able to do to rectify the issues that have arisen through this process.
Oh, well, you know, look, I've got every confidence in the ministry's processes here, but it sounds like that, you know, the feedback I have is people feel like they're being rushed, and so the first step, of course, is just to you know, one of the good things about being in New Zealand is it's a relatively small place, and people can have direct conversations and see what we can agree. And, you know, if we need to change the way we're doing it, we can consider that, but, you know, sure, we'll find a way through.
So would you consider an extension to the consultation window?
Well, yes, I will consider it. I'm not going to commit to it because we've also got, you know, things that people are waiting on, but we can take some time to look about that, look through that if we can.
Good. Looks like, yeah. Ruben Davidson, more questions? Primary, is it? We still have time.
It can be, but we've still got so much time and so much.
Oh, come on.
Page is here we haven't got through yet.
Yeah, quickly.
I'm interested in the AM frequency and the well, I guess as an opening question, what you see as the future of the AM frequency in New Zealand?
Well, it still carries on doing its thing. We had up in Auckland, there were 2 big masts, and now there's going to be 1 big mast. And still, there are people who tune in, and it still has a place. Not perhaps as much as it used to. I don't know about you, but I tend to listen to things on my phone through the internet rather than through a Wi-Fi, and a lot of people through AM or FM, but people in their cars often obviously still do. So it still has a place.
Particularly in emergencies and for resilience.
Yes.
So any thoughts on that? Like, do you see, you say it still has a place, that doesn't determine whether you think you need to continue investment in that infrastructure to ensure it's available as a resilience tool?
Well, as you know, there's 1 step removed, but you know, Radio New Zealand have invested in putting in a very substantial new tower in Auckland. So they obviously see the value in doing that, and we support that.
Just with regards to those radio towers in Auckland that have come down,
yes,
they obviously had a large footprint, much larger than the tower at the ground level. So there's a passing.
There was the wires. There were sort of wires coming out.
Yes, well, hopefully, otherwise the function would have been somewhat compromised.
Yes.
But they did sit on about 7 hectares of land.
Yes.
What are the plans for that piece of land?
Well, that's a matter that RNZ are working through, and so they're still keeping 1, but where the second one was will become available, and my understanding that arrangements have been made for that to be used. I'm just not quite sure what is publicly available or not. Actually, I might just need to check that before I spell. But it'll continue to serve a useful purpose.
So if the disposal or sale of that land generated revenue,
yes,
for the property owner,
yes,
land owner,
yes,
Radio New Zealand in this instance,
yes,
that would look to me like a sizable piece of funding that could be reinvested back into a potentially under-resourced state broadcaster.
Well, if any money was realised, well, then there would naturally be a discussion between the broadcaster and the government about what should stay with the broadcaster and what should come back to the people of New Zealand. And there would be that discussion.
Sure. So you're open to some or all of those funds going directly back into.
Well, it's not just a matter of me being open to it, it's also a matter of the Minister of Finance being into it as well. And so we'll be having those discussions.
Okay.
But you're not ruling out that some or all of those funds could go back to Radio New Zealand?
I'm not ruling anything in or out. Well, I can rule out not all of it being kept by a particular broadcaster. Yes, I could rule that out. But certainly there's a discussion to be had about, you know, exactly what happens with the proceeds.
Okay. So looks like that's all. Thank you so much, Minister. There might be some written questions, follow-up questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Speaker, kindly note, we've digitized the remote. Once we governed primetime slots, now we govern camera shots. Public service loud and proud, now optimized for scrolling crowds. Policy in night 16, democracy but make it lean. We held an inquiry into the frame, found landscape privilege was to blame. Vertical equity's overdue, representation in every view. Rotate the nation, spin it right, portrait by day, widescreen by night. For every thumb and every couch, we've got a format to renounce. If the numbers dip, don't panic yet. Just pivot the aspect ratio set to modes. One proclamation, thorough nation, through rotation. We promised depth, delivered glare, with ring light staged for public care.
And opportunities across our economy. New Zealand should be proud of the fact that an increasing amount of electricity is being produced by renewable sources. However, our energy system also has significant challenges which this government is focused on solving. The government's focus is to ensure New Zealand has abundant, affordable, reliable and increasingly renewable energy. To achieve these objectives, the government has made a number of key decisions to provide certainty to the market. We stopped the previous government's Lake Onslow project, allowing the sector to move forward with its own investment plans. We've put in place fast-track legislation to make consenting faster and more cost-effective. We removed the 100% renewable target by 2030, which was disincentivising investment in thermal backup energy for when the lakes are low. And due to these policies, we're seeing real results. Since coming into office, nearly 1 gigawatt of new renewable generation has been brought online. More new generation has come online in the past 3 years than in the previous 8 years combined. Future wholesale prices have fallen noticeably since we announced our decision to procure an LNG importation terminal. And in the last quarter of last year, a record 96% of the electricity generated in New Zealand came from renewable sources. However, there is more work to do, particularly with a significant reduction in gas supply we have seen in recent years following the previous government's decision to ban oil and gas exploration. Ultimately, we need to ensure that when the lakes are low, the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining, that we have a solution to provide the backup energy needed in a dry year. The energy gap that has been identified by MB in a dry year is approximately 3 terawatt hours of electricity. Thanks to the Huntly firming options, half of this is covered by the coal stockpile at Huntly. However, we need another 1.5 terawatt hours to provide that backup. After significant analysis and examining a range of options, MB has advised the most cost-effective and fastest option to procure an LNG importation terminal. The government is acting on this advice. With a dry year expected every 4 years and the last one hitting in 2024, we don't have the luxury of time to spend another 10 years building a lake at the bottom of the South Island to solve this problem. We must act now and we must act decisively. That is precisely why we are procuring an LNG importation terminal alongside putting in place an obligation on the major generator retailers that they must manage the dry year risk with significant fines if they don't. Alongside this decision, the government is investing in practical support to secure New Zealand's energy needs. Budget 26 invests in supporting industrial gas users to convert from gas to other forms of energy with the loan guarantee scheme, freeing up gas for those who need it the most. Supporting investment in putting solar panels in schools to reduce schools' electricity costs and increase resilience. Providing for resilience from the Middle East conflict with investment in strategic diesel reserve, which has been established in record time with diesel flowing to those tanks this week. In addition, the government is making it easier to install rooftop solar, modernising energy efficiency rules and enabling technologies like EV charging, giving consumers more control over their power bills, strengthening competition and ensuring strong, effective regulation. There is a lot going on and we need to stay the course to make electricity more abundant, more affordable and reliable to underpin economic growth and help New Zealanders get ahead. And with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Minister. We start with Honourable Megan Rose.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, you're familiar, I'm sure, with Concept Consulting's market modelling. that concludes that New Zealand faces no imminent physical gas deliverability crisis and there's no urgent physical need for an LNG terminal by 2028 to meet that non-petrochemical demand. Have you received this advice?
I've seen advice from consulting that was provided to the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. Ultimately, the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment has taken into account a range of pieces of advice in order to look at the dry year risk and what's required to fill that gap. And the reality is the most recent data shows that the gas reserves reduced by another 23% in the last year. That advice was released only, I think, from MB last month. And that indicates another significant downgrade in our gas availability as a country. And due to that, the risk only increases. The other point that I would make is that we have a choice around, or we have a real issue here around with the Maui field expected to close shortly, and with that potentially Methanex. And through that, we lose the ability to have that flexibility which the New Zealand energy market has relied on for many, many years, which is when we have a dry year, we have the ability to have a large gas user to be able to effectively turn off their production and for that gas to be able to shift across to electricity use. Without a major user like that, the system becomes incredibly inflexible, and the alternative is effectively many industrial businesses having to turn off during a dry year, and that is economic destruction. It's called demand destruction. That's jobs, that's businesses being shut down, jobs being destroyed, and that's not a future I think that anyone around this table wants for the New Zealand economy. And so the reality is that we have to make decisions. We've been advised of the 1.5 terawatt hour gap that needs to be filled. We've been advised that the most cost-effective and fastest solution to fill that is to have an LNG importation terminal. We are pursuing that in order to make sure that we protect our economy, put downward pressure on power bills, and make sure we fill the gap left by the dry year risk.
So supplementary to that, and the concept modelling that I've seen takes into account the latest gas figures, I believe. So have been updated to take those into account. But their modelling, and I'm sure you will have seen it too, Minister, estimates that forcing the LNG terminal into the system adds around $6.2 billion in present value costs to the New Zealand economy, and that's an undiscounted sum of around $24 billion, while largely benefiting gas pipeline and field owners. So what modelling has the Minister seen that has convinced him to go ahead with this when he has commissioned modelling by his own officials that puts a cost to the New Zealand economy of $6 billion?
Well, firstly, MB looked at the dry year risk and went through a range of options in the cabinet paper. It's all been released before. You've seen it, I'm sure. We referred to you that information in written questions as well, and in the House. So it's all available online for you to read about all of the options that were considered around how we can address this risk. And one of the points which I think the member is ignoring is the fact that this is not something that can be solved in 2037. We have a dry year risk every 4 years on average. We don't have the luxury to wait till 2037 to build a $16 billion lake at the bottom of the South Island, which was what that member proposed to do when she was last in government. We don't have that luxury. We have a risk in front of us that needs to be addressed. It requires decisions to be made. And MB's analysis is that the fastest and cheapest option before us is to have an LNG importation terminal, and something which ultimately will provide the energy that's needed into our system. So we are solving a problem which the previous member ignored, and we're providing it. And ultimately, we have already seen a significant reduction in wholesale prices on the forward market following the decision that we made as a government.
We'll come to your conflation of correlation and causation in a moment, but supplementary question. So the minister's saying he doesn't agree with the concept modelling. And that his official, no, sorry, Minister, I'll finish my question.
Hold on. Yeah, okay.
I'll finish my question.
You're making an assertion.
Well, I'm paraphrasing from you, Minister. You're saying that you don't agree and your officials didn't agree with the concept modelling, which for the
They provided
record,
advice.
you did not provide to us in written questions. You redacted it because you didn't want it out there.
No, sorry.
So I will
Hold on,
finish my
members.
There is certainly
question.
Hold on,
No,
hold on,
I
hold
all
on,
sorts of
hold on.
conjecture into a
I
conversation.
think you had the opportunity to ask a
Okay.
Ask a
supplementary.
question.
Will
I'll have
he
to answer
please
it.
release the advice, the modelling from MB that negates what Concept has modelled in terms of the $6 billion cost to the New Zealand economy, and why he thinks it's a good idea to push ahead with something that is so clearly going to cost the country jobs and higher energy costs, because that's what his own officials commissioned modelling shows.
Well, the member is wrong. The member is completely wrong, because we, firstly, what we are doing is protecting jobs by ensuring we have the energy needed in our economy. The member's option that she is saying is don't do anything, ignore the dry year risk. And I'm sorry, but we saw what happened following her time as Minister of Energy. It hit in 2024. The spot price hit $800 a megawatt hour in 2024. We suffered huge economic devastation following 6 years while she was the minister, and while she failed to actually address the risk which she knew about when she was in charge. The cost to our economy, about $5.2 billion last year. Jobs, businesses were shut. The Tiwai smelter went out. Obviously, it was good that they had the demand response, but ultimately that's less production and that's less GDP for our economy. That is the direct result of ignoring the problem, something this government will not do.
So supplementary in the information you did release with your cabinet paper, that you go through the scenarios that your officials did look at, one of which was the Rankine option. It was shown to have a cost between $150 to $170 a megawatt hour for coal and $180 to $215 a megawatt hour for biomass, scored the highest on there. What I'm interested in is why locking in new significant generation capacity, and that option was ruled as a negative in your assessment in the cabinet paper.
Well, there's 2 points I'd make. Firstly, the time it would take to build a new Rankine unit would take significantly longer than to put in place an LNG importation terminal, which was considered important. And timeliness is important here because on average, we expect to have, on average, a dry year every 4 years.
Sorry, just to clarify, Minister, I'm not asking about timing, I'm asking about the generation.
I said 2 points, so I'm happy to keep answering.
Yeah.
Well, the bit on the
Minister,
generation, not the timing.
Yeah, but they're both important points to your
Different
question.
part of the matrix.
Yeah, they're both important
Members,
points
can I
to
just
your
say this,
question.
that for Hansard, I want to make sure it's only one person speaking at a time. Please don't talk over another person. So Minister is answering, please, Minister, can you carry on for now?
Yeah, so the first point is obviously the time it takes to build. The second is around the long-term duration of the assets is obviously a factor in terms of the time when, if you look at the modelling suggests that as we have greater build of renewables, which is enabled by LNG, ultimately the need for that thermal backup does reduce over time. A new Rankine is a 50-year asset, whereas an LNG importation terminal doesn't need to be. And so there's a difference in the timing and what's required by the asset. So that's the point in terms of those factors that have been considered by MB in the options analysis. But I bring it back to the first point I was making, which is actually critically important, which is on average, we have a dry year every 4 years. The last one was in 2024. The next one could be, on average, would be expected around 2028. We actually have to make decisions which address this issue quickly and in a timely manner. Otherwise, we risk economic carnage on our economy, something the previous minister was prepared to have, something I am not.
All right, a supplementary, Scott Willis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we certainly don't want to see any more economic carnage that's been happening under this government. But what I'm really interested in is the minister having removed the levy of all electricity users to pay for LNG. How will the minister pay for LNG? Is the minister going to compel the gentailers to purchase LNG? Is this the way in which the import terminal will be paid for?
Well, firstly, as I said in my speech last week to the Auckland Business Chamber, we won't be putting a levy on people's power bills because that's not the right way to pay for this. The risk, the dry year risk, sits with the electricity generators and retailers, and that's the point of in addition to what we're doing here, of putting in place the dry year regulatory framework to actually make it very clear where the risk lies. And to put obligations in place clearly on those electricity generators and retailers to manage that risk. That is their job. That's what they should be doing. Secondly, we have said very clearly that we will require them to pay for it. We have MB and NIFCO currently in negotiations with them around a funding model to enable them to do that. And we've said we'll have a regulatory backstop in place if they fail to come to an agreement.
So is the Minister saying whether or not the gentailers see LNG as necessary, they will pay for it?
Well, we've been through a period of time where we've assessed the options and we've come to the conclusion this is the most cost-effective and fastest way to deal with this issue. The gentailers have not resolved the dry year regulatory risk over a very long period of time that they've had available to them to do so. And so we have put an option on the table. We are requiring them to pay for it. And we will be putting in place a regulatory obligation, which makes it incredibly clear that it is their job to fix this issue. And if they don't, there's going to be hefty fines.
And thank you, Minister. And I appreciate the Minister's clear indication of heavy intervention in the electricity sector. And given the government's willingness to intervene, why would the government not intervene in building the geothermal we know we can build, in supporting the biomass options that we know are there, in supporting the solarisation, massive solarisation that are already there? If the government's willing to intervene, why is the government taken off the table all of the other options and focused on fossil fuels?
Well, we want to have an option which ultimately delivers in a timely manner to address the dry year risk. And that was a key criteria in the options analysis. Now, if it was to build a significant, to have solar, well, solar does not provide electricity, which is with batteries, which can currently get you through a 3-month dry year winter. That option's not available to us at this stage. Battery technology is good at intraday peaks. Soon it'll be good at day to day and maybe even longer, but that's not an option which is currently available to us today. We have the gas-fired generation plant sitting idle whilst we do not have the gas available to necessarily make sure we can. That's exactly what happened in 2024. We were running the coal Rankins, we had, but we didn't have the gas to be able to fit the gap. And so we're looking at the reality of our energy system today, the kit that's available, and also looking at how can we solve this in a timely manner. And we have to make decisions, and we have to make those in a way that is in the best interest of the New Zealand economy. That is exactly what we've done.
New one.
Supplementary, yes.
Supplementary, yeah.
So there's the one-off $4 million adjustment to utilise underspends in the Giddy Fund is put forward for offshore renewable energy regulator revenue risk and the liquefied natural gas procurement process costs. How much of that $4 million is going to LNG procurement?
Oh, look, there is a cost to obviously the procurement process. We can come back to you in writing with that specific answer to that question.
That would be good. Yeah, we have a supplementary from Dr. David Wilson.
Yes, Minister, thank you. Very complete. Talking about the gas transformation is really interesting in light of Mr. Willis's previous questions. We have options. We've got electrifying of residential business, got geothermal, got biomass and so on. But a couple of the businesses I've been at just recently say actually it's almost impossible for us to electrify. We already have solar for parts of our business, but the other part we need gas for the right heat at the right time. So do you think that there's an option here for us to tailor the gas LNG towards firming energy to support those businesses, mainly dairy?
Well, what we've said as part of the negotiation between MB NIFCO and the generator retailers is that part of the funding model should allow for a user pays element for those who wish to access gas, but they would have to pay for that as part of that agreement. Ultimately, the budget also funds the gas transition loan scheme or guarantee scheme, and that's designed to support businesses that can transition. But also one of the requirements so it's transition from gas to another form of energy, but it also enables companies who want to invest in kit which have may reduce the amount of gas that they use, so more modern and more efficient equipment as well. So I think the minimum reduction in gas use is 15%.
analysts are saying it's not the LNG decision, it's put the downward pressure, it's the lakes are full, the sun's been shining, there's more generation coming on stream, there's a range of things that come in and shows the danger of correlation and causation muddling. But I'm just clarifying, you don't have in this year's work program any specific measures to stop that passing.
We are significantly increasing the powers in terms of the
But
ability
beyond
for the Electricity Authority to hold the major gentailers accountable with significant increased fines, something that you failed to do when you were the minister.
Okay, so just the last
Okay,
sup on this, the last
all
sup on this. So, Minister, the government sits on two sides of the announcement that the June 9 package. So there's the proceeding with the procurement of the LNG terminal, then there's also the winter energy reliability option, which requires large market participants to secure long duration firm energy. Now, obviously, in terms of the mixed ownership model companies, some very technical questions come into play here. So I'm just wondering what advice the Minister has received around being a 51% shareholder in those gentailers and what steps are being taken or what advice that he's received to ensure that steps are taken to ensure they're not sitting on both sides of the commercial arrangement and whether or not there'll be related party disclosures that will be required and the rights of the minority shareholders in those companies.
Well, I'm acting as the Minister of Energy in relation to the decisions that were announced on the Tuesday, the 9th of June, in terms of related party disclosures that the MOM companies have to make. Obviously, if that came into effect, they would have to give effect to those related party disclosure rules.
So that would mean that the 49% of shareholders would get to vote on whether or not this proceeds and the Crown would have to step aside.
Well, there are rules in place when it comes to related party disclosures, and ultimately those rules are set as part of their trading obligations. As Minister of Energy, though, I've been clear about the approach that we're taking. We have entered into negotiations with between MB and NIFCO and the gentailers, and also the point of the winter reliability obligations is very clearly about saying, as Minister of Energy, that the dry year risk sits with these companies to manage and to ensure that they address the risk that they have failed to do.
Have you had legal advice?
In terms of?
In terms of you being on both sides of this equation, in terms of the Crown being on both sides, of the Crown being on both sides of the equation of being a 51% shareholder and also making policy that is basically directing to a commercial decision.
So I've received advice around related party disclosures, related party transactions, in terms of the what I'm doing as the Minister of Energy, though, is very clearly about putting the obligation where it should have always been and setting policy in place which provides for that.
Will you release that advice?
Well, look, I've received advice. I mean, it's subject to the Official Information Act.
So, but the committee could request it.
Okay, so Scott Willis, New Primary.
Thank you. And Minister, the price volatility of LNG wasn't modelled as part of MB's assessment of the suitability of an LNG import terminal. So I wonder if you could explain why that wasn't the case and what you think the impact of the high volatility of LNG might have on households, given that there will be a pass-through some way through to households.
Well, we've looked at the forward prices and we've looked at obviously the impact of the situation in the Middle East and the implications of that. And what we've seen and what the International Energy Agency says is that the forward prices show that the price comes down very quickly back within the range that we set when we agreed to this as in the initial cabinet decisions and what's been released. And the International Energy Agency has pointed out that the amount of LNG that's coming online over the next 3 to 4 years well exceeds what has been disrupted through the war in the Middle East. And so we have obviously looked at that particular issue. In terms of volatility, in terms of prices, I mean, we rely on We rely on coal significantly. We're one of the few countries in the world which is transitioning from diesel to coal. But we rely on coal, and that also has its own price volatilities. It's also from one single market, one country. And so there's obviously risks there as well. Genesis as the importer of that coal has to manage those risks, and I think does manage those risks through normal commercial management of price volatility, which we would expect would be done in this case too.
And Minister, there's been numerous Official Information Act requests to MB on LNG from multiple organisations. They've always been answered significantly overdue. Are you concerned that this is giving the impression that MB's keeping inconvenient information out of the public arena until decisions are made, until we've already decided that this is where we're going?
Well, I mean, my expectation is that MB operates within the requirements under the Official Information Act.
Even though they're overdue?
No, well, my expectation is that they give effect to the Official Information Act.
I'm happy to have a look into that. If there's been delays in responses, I'm happy to have a look into that.
Good, that's good.
I've got a new line.
New primary.
So I was picking up on the deindustrialisation arguments that the Minister is putting up as a case for doing this. The concept modelling makes the case not only would LNG cost New Zealand more than it saves, but it also makes the case that the deindustrialisation argument doesn't stack up. It makes the point that the clearest candidates to exit New Zealand and rather to switch to alternative fuels are gas-intensive, trade-exposed industries, but for most of these, gas is a minority fuel. So it doesn't really see that as rescuing the case. Probably wood processing is one of the industries that we've seen hardest hit in terms of closures over the last couple of years. We've had Genesis Energy at Select Committee making the case for setting up the supply chain for biomass, whether that either be torrefied pellets or for just chip in terms of that. Has the Minister seen that advice from Concept on deindustrialisation?
I'm not sure if I've seen that particular advice, but I have seen there's a range of perspectives in terms of that issue. But what I have seen was what I experienced when I was the Minister of Energy in 2024 and what happened that year because the dry year risk wasn't managed. It was a significant closures of firms. We saw prices go to significant heights. And actually, from my perspective, that's not something that we as government want to see happen. So if the member's advocating for ignoring the problem and kicking the can down the road, which seems to be the approach of the Labour Party, then she's very much on the side of shutting down businesses, shutting down jobs, and putting our economy at risk. It's not something that I'm prepared to do. Would note that when we made the announcement last week, major energy users group said the government's package represented a significant step towards addressing long-standing concerns about New Zealand's energy security. That's something which we agree with. Council, the Business New Zealand Energy Council Director of Advocacy, Catherine Beard, said LNG was a solution which can likely be implemented at pace to address immediate dry year concerns. So I think the voices of business are very much on the side of making a decision and moving forward at pace in order to reduce the risk that they see their businesses exposed to.
Yeah, Minister, I'll just ask us up on that, but yeah, Minister, your officials have advice and no doubt have been briefing you that this is going to cost New Zealand more than it saves and doesn't save, isn't the deindustrialisation isn't an argument that can put in place of that. One of the things that I'd be interested whether the Minister has asked for any advice about the impact of the decision to go ahead with LNG on the balance of payment. We have clear choices, far from saying that we should do nothing. I agree with the problem definition. I think there are alternatives. It doesn't lock New Zealand into a highly volatile, high-cost pathway. If we look, for example, at using biomass in Huntly, that we have the opportunity to create jobs here in New Zealand rather than relying on imported fossil fuels from other economies. What we do know from the concept consulting modelling is the impact on the balance of payments over time, and has the Minister asked for advice what that will be, rather than creating homegrown energy solutions that create jobs and opportunities here in New Zealand, but instead wanting to subcontract that out to the rest of the world?
I'll ask Nick to speak to the issue.
So on the overall how MB's taken into account these different models, we haven't looked at just one. That there are different modelling that find different things, and so we've looked across those. And so our judgment around the gap of around 3 terawatt hours is based on a number of different sources, and a lot of that was in the business case late last year. To this issue on gas price and so on, there was some recent analysis that was commissioned by the Gas Industry Corporation that PwC did. In fact, that showed that under LNG, prices for gas would be lower because of gas going down so quickly, that the demand and the demand unable to transition fast enough. So we are concerned about the ability for industry to transition in time and for the electricity system to transition in time. And so that is that's the basis of we do see the need for this, and that's why that range of analysis, it's not just one, we've looked across to take into account what we think is a fair reflection.
So thank you for that. In terms of the economic analysis, obviously the concept modelling that you commissioned was quite comprehensive. Not all of it was made public. Will you now release all of that concept modelling that was provided to MB?
We're happy to have a look at it. I'm not sure the exact reasons that we are sharing. Do you want to cover that?
So we released all of the concept modelling that we relied upon. So we commissioned concept to do modelling to understand the price effects of on the spot market of with and without LNG, and that was the modelling that we released in February this year. Just this week, after some OIA requests, we released what is a draft slide pack. So that was never a finalised report. That was a slide pack that was the means of MB and concept communicating kind of draft findings as they came through, and material has been redacted under the Official Information Act.
So
and we're comfortable with the...
Yeah, but the pack that you're referring to is the one that puts the cost to the New Zealand economy of $6.2 billion.
You might be referring to the recent gas report in front of you, which was not that report was not done for MB. Right. That report was done of Concept's own bat.
Yeah.
MB has purchased a copy of it. And we are currently working through with Concept some of our concerns about their assumptions. So we're in the process. We think there were some overly optimistic assumptions about the way the gas market works.
So have you briefed the Minister on that report?
No, we have not.
Has the Minister had a copy? Has he asked for a copy?
He asked us yesterday for us to brief him this week, and so we will be doing so.
When did you receive it?
I received the updated report last week.
Right.
All right. Scott Willis, you have a supplementary? Or is that a
Yes,
new one?
apparently some dodgy assumptions as well, which I'm hearing about.
Supplementary.
Are you looking at environmental or emissions relating considerations in the procurement process? Is this part of the procurement process that you're undertaking?
And the procurement process is underway, and it's looking at the 12 PJ that's required over a period of 3 months in order to provide the 1.5 terawatt hours of gas that's needed in order to be able to meet the dry year risk. We've also, obviously, there's a timeliness element to it. We need to make sure this is in place rapidly by winter 2028, which is pretty key in order to be able to support the New Zealand economy and the eventuation of a dry year in that year. And so those are the key parts of the procurement process.
So that's a no.
Well, we're procuring a piece of infrastructure effectively. That's what we're procuring. Obviously, the use of the gas is a different part of the equation. But what we're currently going through is a procurement for the infrastructure. So if you're talking about construction emissions, I don't think that's a key criteria.
Well,
Would you like? Well, I mean, are you suggesting things should be built out of wood?
great idea.
Okay.
Okay, so do you have a question or
No, thank you.
no new primary for
No
you?
new
Okay,
primary on there.
you have a new primary, is it?
Supplementary.
Supplementary, Dr. David Wilson. Yeah.
I'm interested in the timing issues that we're talking about, some of these other alternative energy, such as geothermal, torrefied wood pellets, which is largely unproven, and the like. What are we dealing with here? Because obviously what we're talking about with LNG is filling that gap. So can you sort of elucidate on what some of those issues are with transition?
Well, I think, there's a number, it's a good question. There's a number of issues that we're having to work through. And I think, some people say, well, we could transition Genesis to biomass. And I think, Genesis is definitely doing some work in that space. But Genesis still only has 3 Rankins, which can produce 750 megawatts of electricity. Once those are firing at all full capacity, that doesn't, which is effectively what the coal stockpile enables. That only covers half of the energy needs, and so therefore you still need other kits to be able to deliver more energy into the market. And so that either means using existing capacity, which is gas-fired turbines, which we have at Huntly or in other parts of the country, just don't necessarily have the gas to be able to use them, or you have to construct new infrastructure, new kits to be able to burn it. And so all of those solutions are potentially longer term solutions. But a key criteria is being able to do something quickly, because the reality is a dry year comes about on average every 4 years. We don't have the luxury of time. We don't have the luxury to wait till 2037 to build a lake at the bottom of South Island. We don't have the luxury to wait for new technologies. But over time, those technologies will become more proven. They will become, cheaper or more cost-effective or more available. But in the meantime, we have to make a decision which ultimately protects our New Zealand economy.
A new primary from Scott Willis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to switch to energy hardship space, because we've seen 300,000 cut from this year's budget for the appropriation titled Assisting Households in Energy Hardship. And I'm assuming that's the support for energy education and communities bit. And we've seen in budget 24 cut of 1.5 million, the same program. So, and in budget 24, there was also the cut for community focused outreach programs to target the hard to reach households. Now we know that there are over 600,000 households in energy hardship from data that was presented at the Hidden Energy Hardship Hui recently. And these are people who are really, really struggling. Given energy hardship is something that has risen and is growing under this government, what impact is budget 2026 cuts to energy hardship support? What impact will that have on affected households, on those 600,000 households already in energy hardship?
Well, there's a number of things that the government is doing to put downward pressure on power prices. The first one is around security of supply. Ultimately, that is critically important if we are going to have a market which provides affordable and abundant energy for New Zealanders. We need to make sure that we are doing that. ECA obviously has the support for energy education and community, which provides funding to organisations that offer specialist energy advice and education to households. That plays a really important role. They have other advice and support to businesses in energy efficiency and energy use. That plays an important role. The Electricity Authority has recently launched its new comparison and switching site billing, which gives consumers a simple way to check their plan and make sure they're getting the best deal. And I think that's a really important tool. I think the Sarah can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's on average a couple $100 of savings to the consumer over the course of a year from actually making sure they're on the right plan. And so that tool has been launched and encouraged people to use it. Cabinet has also agreed to progress Open Electricity under the Consumer Product Data Act to make it even easier for customers to compare electricity plans and make the best decisions for their households. So there's a number of things the government's doing in order to support customers and support consumers and provide a more competitive market. Of course, the winter energy payment is available to those on either superannuitants or those on benefits. And that plays a really important role to make sure that people who need that support the most, is targeted intervention to support those people who need that support the most. And that's in place from the 1st of May to the 1st of October to anyone receiving a main benefit, pension or job seeker support. So there's a range of different initiatives in place to provide support to those who need it the most.
And supplementary, so while it may be a relatively small budget cut in this greater scheme of things, that the little bit that went to the support for energy education in communities really was one of those key bits of funding that went to get to those hard to reach households. And it may well be, the Minister may well assume that everyone is literate on computers and able to access all kinds of information, but really the type of households and the people we're dealing with are people who are really struggling, who may not have a computer in their house, who may have holes in the walls, who really do need whānau help and whānau navigation through these programs. And that's the type of program that has now been cut through funding. What does the Minister think we can do to get those people, to help those people who are really, really struggling, hard to reach, and can't afford to heat their home to a healthy level, and then become clients of our health system?
Yeah, so the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority does deliver programs in that space and will continue to provide programs in that space. But I put it to you, the gentailers also have an obligation to make sure that they are doing their bit to provide information to their customers, and I encourage them to do their part to provide information and support to their customers. They also have an obligation in this space, and I encourage them to pull their weight.
Supplementary.
Yeah.
So will the Minister work with the gentailers to seek from the 4 gentailers at least $5 million per gentailer annually to put into a fund to work with those hard to reach households?
Well, I
this
agree.
Is something that I think they're open to, and it would be helpful if we could have some bipartisan support on
Well,
this.
I agree they should be doing more.
Okay, so supplementary from Honourable Willis.
Thank you. One of the long-term programs that we've had to help households in energy hardships heat their homes is Warmer Kiwi Homes. And I note that there's no funding for the program in the budget beyond 27-28. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was a funding cliff put in place by the previous government.
So, but this government hasn't put any additional funding in the 3 budgets that it's produced to extend that out.
No, so it's a funding cliff put in place by the previous government.
So, but there's been 3 budgets that this government has produced, and no additional funding has been put into Warmer Kiwi Homes, and there's not in this budget.
Yes, so my understanding is it was time limited funding put in place.
No, it needed to be topped up in subsequent budgets. It's choices governments make. But there actually was a cut to Warmer Kiwi Homes, to funding from Warmer Kiwi Homes in this year's budget as part of the energy funding reprioritisation package. That's around, I think it was $8.5 million from memory.
there was an operational underspend from ECA. It was not funding which was allocated to the actual delivery of the services. It was an operational funding of ECA's from ECA's baseline.
So given there is no funding beyond 2027 for this program, was there any consideration given by you, Minister, to put that underspend into the program so we could have more homes be insulated?
We've made choices around reprioritisation, and obviously one of the initiatives that we have put funding towards has been the Solar on Schools program, which is going to deliver solar panels on schools for around 500 schools across New Zealand, which I think is a really positive step forward.
Don't disagree. I'm interested in people's homes and insulation of people's homes.
And we've made
with this question.
And we've made choices to put that funding towards some of the underspends towards some of those initiatives.
That funding, my understanding, came from the reprioritisation out of Giddy. I'm talking about the 8.5 million that's been taken out of warmer Kiwi homes back into the general pot, and whether or not the minister gave any consideration, given he couldn't secure additional funding to continue this program beyond 27-28, whether he gave any consideration to putting that into further insulations of New Zealanders who are struggling with their power bills and can't heat their homes.
So this budget continues funding for that for the Warmer Kiwi Homes initiative. Obviously, there are decisions that will need to be made in future budgets around the next steps. But the underspend that the member is talking about was operational costs from ECA's baseline, and the savings in total from underspends around Giddy, operational costs for Warmer Kiwi Homes, and discontinued Crown funding for Ariake come to, I think, around 57.35. $2 million over the forecast period.
Given that there is no funding for Warmer Kiwi Homes beyond 27-28, and this is the first time in decades, this is a program that has been supported by governments on all sides of the house. So this is a first that we've seen a government not put support into the insulation scheme. It is funding that was already there, additional funding. What we have seen is over decades that governments have made budget decisions to extend the Warmer Kiwi Homes out. It's exactly the same program that we inherited when we came into government and decided to keep funding in budgets that we delivered. So what I'm interested in, has the minister received advice around alternatives if the Warmer Kiwi Homes program is discontinued, about how support will be given to households that are struggling to heat their homes, to insulate their homes and to pay their power bills?
Yeah, so the funding is in this budget for that program.
Through to 27-28, but there is no funding beyond that. So what I want to know is, a part of the advice, whether you've got alternatives.
Yes, the funding is in that in the budget to continue the program. Obviously, future budgets will need to consider the fact that the next steps around this particular program and the options around, and that advice will be forthcoming. The point is that the funding is there in this budget for that program. The underspend is from operational sources.
Okay, any more? Scott Willis.
Thank you. Given that ECA's taken over Ariake's responsibilities, what organisational changes is ECA making to make sure that the innovation that was sustained by Ariake, New Zealand's Energy Innovation Centre, will continue? And I'm thinking there of hosting the Flex Forum, the annual energy hardship hui, multi-trade relationships, that type of work that was happening with Ariake. What is going to happen now that it's moved to a different organisation?
Yeah, so I can ask CEO of ECA to speak to that.
Okay. Good afternoon, Scrutiny Committee. So I'm Marcus Pelliner, CE of ECA. We are in direct conversations with Ariake. I met with the CE last week. Basically, they want to wrap things up under their own steam and then hand that over to us in a tidy way. So there's been no immediate decisions made, because we're in conversations with Ariake. Expect to have those conversations over the next few months.
Thank you.
Okay, good. All good. Start.
You
can send some written questions later.
No, one more little.
Yep.
Yeah, so given there's the Solar on Schools which has come out of Ariake program. It's a really positive step. And why would question one, why would we not go further? Why wouldn't we not put solar on every single school? And secondly, is there any work underway, perhaps it's with the Electricity Authority, to think about the actual cost of transmitting those electrons locally rather than the cost that we have, or the value that's given to locally produced electrons? Is there any work underway to ensure that we can have peer-to-peer sharing of electricity, given that we will have schools in our communities that are not used at weekends and during the summer period, when we will have the greatest solar production?
So in terms of the first answer, the first part of that question, 500 schools is what the funding that we have allocated enables, which I think is a great start. I think there's obviously a future opportunity, which would be a question for future budgets.
Future governments.
In terms of the second part to your question, I will ask the CEO of the Electricity Authority to speak to that.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. In terms of your question about what I think you're talking about really is innovation and what some of the new ways or the new models might be. And as you may be aware, the Electricity Authority, so we're responsible for the rules of the system, and sometimes those rules need to be updated to keep pace with what's changing and new business models, new innovations. We really want to see consumers get the benefit of anything new that might ultimately help drive down total system costs. So what we want to achieve is reliable electricity at lowest possible cost for consumers, and new business models can deliver that. And so one of the things we've done in the last few years is establish what we call the Power Innovation Pathway, which is a way for some of those innovators to come in and engage with us. That helps inform the rules and whether we need to change the rules in quite specific ways to accommodate things that might be in the long term beneficial for consumers. So a shorter answer to your question, I suppose, is yes, there is all sorts of work underway, and we can provide more information about specific programs of work.
We sup on that. So 2019, there was the Network Transformation Roadmap, which was a fantastic document.
Yes.
Lovely words, but very little action in the EDBs. What powers does the EA have to compel the EDBs to be consumer-centric, as they said they would back in 2019, consumer-centric in a way that will enable that peer-to-peer sharing of electricity, the use of those local electrons to make the grid much more resilient, but also more flexible, more dynamic.
I mean, this is a topic we could talk about for quite some time, but I don't think that's the intention. First of all, your question is about what powers we have to compel the EDB. So as a regulator, we are able to make rules for participants in the system that they have to comply with. And so electricity distribution businesses, lines companies are participants in the system. So they are subject to the rules when we make them. That's the first point. I think the second thing that you'd be aware of is that working closely with the Commerce Commission and ECA, we have written to electricity distribution businesses, encouraging the sorts of things that we want to see. And I'm aware also that the Minister has previously written to electricity distribution businesses with the expectation. So there's a range of things that regulators and government can do to encourage the sort of behaviour we want to see in the long run.
One final question.
I am aware that you have some powers. I do remember advisory group, the Innovation and Participation Advisory Group, some years ago, put a recommendation forward that boards of EDBs be compelled to demonstrate innovation and be sanctioned if they could not demonstrate that innovation. Now that was a report produced within the EA. Did it go anywhere?
Well, so I think you were a member of the advisory group at the time. And so it was an independent advisory group to the Electricity Authority. That advice has informed our work over the last few years. In terms of, I suppose, encouraging EDBs to innovate, some of the things I've talked about are partly that. There's also the Commerce Commission's regime, which I'm certainly not going to try and explain. That's not my my remit, but that also has mechanisms to try and encourage innovation. What we want to see ultimately is that lower system cost. And so that can include things like, non-network solutions that help provide, ultimately they can avoid the cost of network build, and those sorts of things I think we all want to see as ways to reduce the total system cost and benefit everyone.
Yes, so members, we don't have enough time left for any more questions. So thank you so much, Minister.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.